Well, Aaron, you were reporting just a few minutes ago about the air war continuing in Afghanistan over Kabul, and I believe you said anti-aircraft fire over Kandahar. Well, we have CNN's team of reporters, of course, monitoring the situation from the closest possible vantage points. Our John Voss is in Islamabad, Pakistan. Now, this is roughly 100 miles from the Afghan border, but we know he's been talking to people there and inside Afghanistan. He joins us now. John.
Well, in fact, Judy, we have been trying to re-establish contact with our source inside Kandahar. That has not happened. The last we heard from him was an hour or so ago. He called one of our producers here in Islamabad. He said, "We are under attack. We are under very, very heavy attack. The windows are shaking." The phone line then dropped out. He either hung up or the phone went dead. It was cut. We are not sure. As I said, we've been trying to establish contact with him. As you can imagine, phone systems within Afghanistan are not great at the best of times, and at moments like these, they are near impossible. The attack on Kandahar comes after an airstrike on the capital, Kabul. We saw elements of anti-aircraft fire with our night scope vision. They were firing into the skies. This comes as the US Secretary of Defense says that the Taliban air defense systems have been taken out. But we did see those elements of anti-aircraft fire. And today here in Islamabad, the Taliban ambassador said that in fact the anti-aircraft defense systems are still in play and they have not been taken out. This is what he said.
American planes are flying very high, and the defense system that we have they are not in the range of the defense system of what we have. As you know, we do not have that sophisticated and modern defense system.
And basically, to clarify what he was saying is that they do have air defense capabilities. It's just that the US planes are flying too high and they can't hit them. So it comes down to your definition of effective. Also at that press conference, the Taliban ambassador said that the food drops which are being distributed by the United States also as part of this campaign are being stockpiled and burnt. He said, quote, this will not appease the Afghan people. He said it was humiliating and he said it was hypocrisy. Judy?
I want to ask you about, we're just reading, I haven't checked checked this with our producers, John, but Reuters is reporting that another unmanned Predator drone, this is a surveillance plane, has been lost over southern Iraq. Now, this could be in the Kandahar area. We have no idea. We don't have any idea, of course, if it was shot down, but they are quoting U.S. sources. Now, this again, if it was shot down, would suggest that the Taliban does still have some semblance of anti-aircraft ability.
Well, very much. That's what the ambassador was saying today. We believe what we understand, and information is very, very difficult, and we get into this war of words, this nuance and this machinations which we go through here every day. But effectively, what we understand, the surface-to-air missiles, the heavy artillery has in fact been taken out. What that leaves the Taliban with are those small mobile anti-aircraft defense systems, one which are basically shoulder-mounted, which can be moved at will by the Taliban and by the forces there within Afghanistan. But we get various conflicting reports all day long. I guess we just have to wait and see on confirmation from that.
The mugshots on the wall there, including Osama bin Laden, many of his known associates, other suspects in previous attacks, the bombing on Khobar Towers, the barracks for U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, suspects in the bombings of the 1998 embassy attacks in Kenya and Tanzania. Mr. Bush using this event to serve notice the war on terrorism is hardly focused solely on bin Laden, hardly focused solely on Afghanistan. More and more we are hearing from administration officials that as the military campaign continues there, look for more moves, some of them military perhaps, but also diplomatic, financial, and otherwise in other parts of the world, Indonesia and the Philippines, two nations that are mentioned frequently as the United States targets suspected terrorist groups and known terrorist groups in those countries as well.
It's a little bit past 2:30 in the east. Here's a quick look at where we are in this half hour.
and there's much going on. U.S. airstrikes are underway in Afghanistan, the 4th straight day of that. Anti-aircraft fire reported in Kabul and in Kandahar. We do have some pictures. We will occasionally see, as you do there, an explosion. It's also very tricky with this night scope video, but that was pretty unmistakable in the center that there's an explosion there. We do not see, but we certainly believe there are some tracer fire going from the ground up. You can actually hear some of the explosions going on in and around Kabul, probably more around than in, to be accurate here. These pictures just coming into us now. It is obviously late in the evening in Kabul, and once again, they are finding nighttime very unpleasant. A reporter for the Arab TV news service Al Jazeera says explosions could be heard at the Kabul airport. We could hear them in these tapes. CNN sources also confirm that Kandahar is under attack. The terminal at that city's airport destroyed. All part of the attacks going on this evening in Afghanistan. While those attacks go on, so do the U.S. shipments of food and supplies for refugees. The first convoy, land convoy, to pass through Iran crossed into the border of Afghanistan. That's on the west side near Herat. The United Nations says Iran gave the green light for such shipments of U.S. aid. Another indication of how extraordinary this all is. Violence rocked Indonesia's capital, the 3rd straight day of that. Police in Jakarta firing tear gas to stop some 1,000 Islamic students from trying to storm the country's parliament. Demonstrators also protested outside the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta. They are demonstrating against the American-led airstrikes in Afghanistan. Indonesia, by the way, is the world's most populous Muslim nation.
Spinning the globe over to Central Asia right now, to United States troop movements as the air campaign continues. Other U.S. forces are setting up camp just across the border from Afghanistan. Pentagon sources telling CNN more than 1,000 U.S. troops are now at a military base in southern Uzbekistan. Among them are members of special operations. Joining us now via video phone from nearby Karshi, CNN's Alessio Vinci. And Alessio, we thought the president of that country said U.S. troops would be only involved in humanitarian and maybe search and rescue missions.
That is correct, Judy. That was the primarily what the two countries had agreed last Friday when Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld made a trip here to Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan, and President Karimov had agreed to allow the U.S. military to use the air base here in nearby Karshi, the Khanabad air base, only for humanitarian missions. However, when reporters asked him why he would not allow the U.S. troops to be also involved in more lethal, if you want, operations into Afghanistan, he said his country was not ready yet, but he did leave some kind of a room for maneuvering, and perhaps suggesting that eventually he would allow those troops to be deployed here for more ground operations in Afghanistan. And Mr. Karimov also said that he was not going to investigate very much into what kind of troops were going to be deployed here, suggesting again that perhaps only it was for public opinion, the fact that he did not want to allow the U.S. troops to be deployed here for strikes against Afghanistan, but only for humanitarian missions. Judy?
Alessio, how close are you permitted to be to this base near Karshi?
Well, we're about 5 miles away from the air base, and between us and the air base there is 3 layers of security. Policemen, the first 2 layers are, we believe, are from the Uzbek forces, Uzbek police mainly, and then the first layer around the base, we understand, is being set up by the U.S. military. So it is very, very hard for us to get a sense about what is happening inside the base. Any kind of contacts we're trying to establish with people who work at the base have been unsuccessful so far. It is extremely hard here to talk to people. They're very afraid to address the issue with reporters. It is a very sensitive issue here, and people are very much afraid to disclose any kind of details about what is the life inside that military base. What we can only do here is basically just listen to the noise of planes taking off and landing. Earlier today, we saw a C-130 flying over the city, perhaps landing at that military base only a few miles away from here. But we can't really get anywhere near and try to get a sense about exactly what is happening in there. So we don't even know if, for example, some of those special troops that you were mentioning earlier today are already involved in the military operation that is now underway in Afghanistan. We heard also from sources in the United States that President Bush may be thinking about involving some ground troops into this fight. Those troops could be the ones deployed here in Uzbekistan, but at this point, there is absolutely no way for us to find out. The officials here are remaining extremely tight-lipped. They don't want to share any kind of information, not only with domestic reporters, but also with the international press. Judy?
All right, CNN's Alessio Vinci reporting from Karshi, which is near a military base in southern Uzbekistan, where, as you hear, U.S. Special Forces, the Pentagon is saying, have now arrived. And at the same time, Aaron, we're told that there are sources in the government are telling us that there are expectations that U.S. helicopters will be part of the next wave of this battle.
Well, you know, it's interesting because the White House formally and the Pentagon formally will not say anything about ground troops going into this. There's always a moment in the White House briefing where Ari Fleischer gets this sort of sly smile on his face, as if to say, you keep asking, I'm not going to answer this question. But there is lots of talk in Washington that is one of the things that's going to happen, that ground troops will play a role in Afghanistan. What kind of role they will play is a more complicated question. We turn to CNN's Joey Chen for that. Joey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Aaron. Thanks very much. Most of us do have an image of what a Special Forces unit is, but what do they do? And more importantly here, how might they be used in the current mission? To get a better picture, we're going to look back and take a fuller picture here. Past couple days of the operation, actually the first 2 days of the operation. You see these are the pictures from day one, noting a lot of the areas of the strikes, command and control centers in yellow here. You also see airfields picked out in blue on our map. Number of other locations, the terror cells as well. Pentagon tells us, if we also look at the day 2 of the operation, Pentagon tells us that the Allied missiles have already taken care pretty much of the Taliban's air defenses. And you see the SAM sites and airfields as well as training camps all outlined on the map here. So what would be next? Well, we do hear from our military experts and what has been reported by CNN White House correspondent John King as well as a number of newspapers today. There are signals that Special Forces might be the next in play to root out Osama bin Laden and his supporters and or to take control of an airfield or airfields that would give allies a ground base for operations. Which Special Forces? Well, what we hear from our experts is that the Air Force Special Ops, you saw them first, would be very likely on the front end of the operation. They are experts in bringing in other Special Forces units by air and very pretty quickly as well. Famed Army Rangers. Certainly you've heard of them, also a Special Ops unit. They can come in very, very quickly. Maybe a lot of them swarming in to one target. To help us understand how these elite forces could come in and help to secure a landing zone, Major General Don Shepard, our CNN military expert. General, if you could talk to us, give us an example, and we're going to use, just as an example, an airstrip that actually was already bombed by the Allied forces, so we know this cannot be a choice. But if you were going to bring Special Forces in to secure an airstrip, how would it be done?
Well, remember that the Special Forces are the James Bonds and ninjas of the military services, supposedly without the liquor and the women is the way they like to be. They're called the quiet professionals. They don't like anything said about them, so this is very general terms, and CNN's been very responsible. Let's take this airfield, for instance. Let's say you wanted to take this airfield. Normally an airfield will be guarded by garrisons of guards, if you will. The idea behind Special Forces is they need to go seize this thing. So what they would do is somehow go into this location. They might already be there and climb out of holes. They might be parachuted in out of the back of an airplane like you just saw. They can also jump from very high altitudes and in, or they can be brought in by helicopters. The idea is you take out the people guarding the airfield, and then you bring in your own combat control teams and set up operations on this airfield so that later you can bring in helicopters and even fixed-wing airplanes, more forces, and then go out from here to do the things that Special Operations Forces do, which is reconnaissance, seizure, capture, and then make the way for heavier Army forces later, Joy.
So you might need an airstrip, for example, to do rescue operations as well, in case you had bat anybody down.
You might indeed. Now again, we don't know if ground forces are going to be going into this area or not. We're all guessing about that, and so are the Taliban. That's the difference between Kosovo and Afghanistan. In Kosovo, we told them we're not coming. Right now, we may be coming, we may not. They may already be there, and they may be coming at any time. This is different, and we have the capability to do all of that from none to a whole bunch and do it very quickly.
And I want to very much emphasize that the picture that you were drawing on, this one is an airfield that we already know there were Allied strikes on, so we know there's no way they can use that. Now, if something like this were secured, what would be the next course in an operation?
Well, the next course of the operation would likely be two things. One, to bring in more forces, and secondly, then to form alliances with the forces that are within Afghanistan, such as the Northern Alliance and other forces in the area. Secretary Rumsfeld has been very, very careful about his rhetoric. We do not want to choose a force as the force of choice to take over the country. We want to let the Afghans decide what the coalition is going to be. So we come in and we control U.S. forces and try to form alliances and coordination with the other forces in the area and work together.
We put a tremendous amount of emphasis and a lot of curiosity right now on the special ops question, whether these special forces would be brought in to do that. Is it possible, though, that you could rely on the local opposition forces to do something like this on their own?
It's possible you can do that, and we would like that to happen, but we will all have our own particular roles. We'll use everybody wherever we can in an alliance to go after the military objectives we're after. All of these forces are important. It's going to be an interesting show.